Hello friends, and welcome to another Happily Letter After tutorial. Today we're going to do a Christmas lettering piece, and we're going to do gingerbread cookie lettering. And we're working in Procreate, and the canvas size is 3000 by 3000 pixels if you want to follow along with me. You can also follow along with pen and paper, crayons, pencils, markers, whatever you'd like, paint. It's pretty simple to do, but if you're doing Procreate, you can follow along exactly with me, and you can use this color palette that I have available for you called Gingerbread. And so the first thing we're going to do is, in this color palette, we're going to grab on the second row this light teal color, and we're going to go ahead and drag and drop it into our layer 1 for our background. And then we're going to add another layer on top of that. And next we're going to select this light brown color here, the first one on the first row. And in the brushes, we're going to select the large round monoline from my lettering brush set that I have. Now, if you do not have my lettering brush set, that's fine. You can always follow along with Procreate brushes. In calligraphy, there is a monoline brush you can use, and you can make it larger, or you can draw your letter and, this is just a shape, and then you could just fill it in, but you can do it that way too if you would like. So we're going to write the word sweet since it's cookies. So what I like about this brush is it's nice and thick, and I actually think I am going to make it a little bit bigger because I feel like the lettering is, like, the letters are a little too thin. So I'm going to, we want it to really look like a cookie. So I'm going to just kind of go over it, and we do not want this to be perfect. Since this is a cookie, we're going to pretend it's dough. It just came out of the oven, and it's kind of, it's not supposed to be perfect. Cookies aren't perfect, and so I'm just going to start, and I'm going to make my letters, and it's going to be like it's placed on a table. So it's going to be kind of uneven. They just came out of the oven, and don't worry, we will frost them. So just kind of put your letters, get them to fit. And I'm doing my E's kind of like backwards 3s, since if you're gonna make a cookie, it's probably going to look kind of messy to begin with. They're not going to be perfect. It's going to be harder to get straight angles. And I'm just not happy with this E for some reason. The first one turned out good. It always happens. And I think I'm going to move some of my letters over a bit. So I think my S is a little too big. So what you can do, so you can fit the T in there, is you can grab in this ribbon brush, we can do freehand, and we can draw around the S, and then go back to the arrow tool and just kind of scale it down a little bit. Make sure you have uniform selected. And now we can use that same one, and we can just kind of move these over a little bit, and we'll get our T in there. Now, don't worry if you don't get this right away on the first try. And I've done this piece before I even film this. I always practice before I film so that I can make sure that I get it the way I want to for you guys. But even still, it's trial and error. So you never know. Every piece always looks different every time I do it. Similar, but different. So just kind of get it to fit. And I kind of don't like how high some of these are. I'm going to move my E up just a little bit. And I'm going to move this one down just a little bit. All right, now we can continue. I'm going to just round this off a little bit more. And I'm going to make my T. I'm going to put my T here. And I'll move my E over just a little bit more. Again, pretend that you actually baked these and you are doing this. And actually, if you like to bake cookies and you make cookies, cut out cookies or gingerbread cookies, this would be a fun way to practice your lettering, just freehand making cookies to look like letters and doing it that way. I've seen people do that and that would be super cute. So if you do that, I would love to see it. Share it with me. Okay, so this whole thing, it's a little high, so we're gonna move it down just a little bit so it's almost centered. And if you want to make it centered, you can do that. And now we're going to swipe over to the left in the layers, and we're going to hit duplicate, and we're going to go down to layer 2, and we're going to click on select, and then we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to use this dark green right here. And now we go back into our layers, click on it again, and we are going to click fill layer. Now this is to do our drop shadow, and I'm doing this now so we don't forget to do it later, because it's going to be more complicated if we try to do it later on when we're trying to get everything else done. So let's just knock this out of the way. So we can go up here to this magic wand tool and click on Gaussian blur, and we'll just drag it, and I'll do about 10%. And I'm gonna go over to the layers again. I'm gonna click on the N, and I'm gonna go to multiply. Now I'm gonna leave it like this for now. You can change the opacity later if you want, if you feel like it's too strong. But for the moment, I'm gonna keep it because we're gonna be working on more stuff. So I'm just gonna work on that for now, and then we'll get to that later. Okay, so next what I'm gonna do, before we even do our frosting, is I am going to add some dimension to these cookies because right now they are very, very, very flat. So what we can do, there's 2 different ways you can do this. Now you can either click on your layer and you can do alpha lock, and let me select the color we're gonna use next. So we're gonna use this dark brown color right here. And so you can use that. And then our next brush that we're gonna use is actually one that came with Procreate. So scroll and get to, now if I can find it, the spray paint brush. And we're gonna use this medium nozzle. And I have the size of my brush at 28%, and the opacity is at 80%. And so you can zoom in a little bit. And we're going to go, let me actually make it smaller. Let's go down, let's try about 11%. I'm going to change this opacity. Okay, yeah, so the opacity, let's do it about 45%, and you're just going to go around the edge. So you can see that you're coloring, if you color all over the place, it's only going to go on your letters. So that's alpha lock. That's one way to do it. Now, there's another way you can do this, so let's turn off alpha lock. The other way to do it is if you add a layer, and then you tap on the layer, and you do clipping mask. Now, anything you draw is only going to show up on this layer. And so I like to do this because I like to have separate layers in case I need to go back and change something, in case I don't like how that layer turned out, or if you wanted to add like a different layer option here, like instead of doing normal, if you wanted to do multiply or lighten or whatever, you can't do that when you do alpha lock. It'll change the entire layer. This is a little more non-destructive, and it's a little more helpful, I think, in doing this. It's just a more non-destructive way of doing it. Now, if you don't have the layers to use, because you don't have enough memory on your iPad or whatever the case may be, then feel free to do alpha lock. But this is a fairly simple piece. We're not going to be doing tons of layers. All right, so same principle applies. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just go around the edges of these cookies to give it this darker shade to it. And yes, it's very dark right now, but we will change that. That's why I was telling you we can change the opacity. Yes, you can change the opacity on the brush, but sometimes it's better to change it on the layer. And so we're gonna do that. But first, let's go ahead and let's get all of our letters. And there's also another thing we can do. Just like we did for the shadow, you can do a Gaussian blur, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we can do a Gaussian blur. We can do both. So there are so many different effects, and I recommend if you're new to Procreate that you play around with the different tools and settings and just see what this program has to offer, because it has so much, and I don't even know all of it because there's so many different things and they keep adding to it, and it's amazing and it's so much fun. Okay, so now that we have this, we can go over to the magic wand again and we can do Gaussian blur, and we can blur that. So kind of the same as we did before, about 10%. And so we can do a combination where we can go in here and we can change this down to about 75 or 77%. And now we're gonna add another layer, and we're gonna do kind of like a highlight, like for the raised part of the cookie in the middle, because the cookies are, they're more rounded when they bake. And so again, if we tap on clipping mask, it's going to go down to this layer that we have the lettering suite on. So we will go in here and we're going to select this color right here, this light tan, and we're going to keep the same brush, and we're just going to go along the middle, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to do a Gaussian blur, and we're going to go ahead and change the opacity. So let's get the Gaussian blur, and this one I'm blurring just slightly more. So it's about 14%. And so you can just tap that again to get out of that. And we don't really have to change the opacity. It's kind of nice the way it is. I mean, you can make it go down a little bit. It's kind of nice to have, it's kind of nice to have it lighter. I might make it down to about 78%. Okay, so now we can get to the fun part of it, where we can get our cookie. Well, I'm gonna actually change this. I remember I was telling you this is a little dark. We can turn that opacity down a little bit to about 77, there. Okay, so now we're gonna add another layer on top of everything else. We're not doing a clipping mask. You don't have to, because we're not gonna be potentially drawing outside of the cookie at all. It's all gonna be on top of the cookie. So this layer is going to be our frosting on the cookie. So we're gonna go ahead and grab this light color. This last color here is white on the bottom, or the off-white, and we're gonna go back to the brushes, the lettering brushes that I made, or if you have just the Procreate brushes, you can use the monoline. And we're gonna use a small monoline. And if you've never looked at a gingerbread cookie, they're always outlined. Actually, instead of the small, I think I'm gonna do the medium. We'll do the medium round. And my brush size is at 21%. And if you've never looked at a gingerbread cookie, they outline the cookie when they do the gingerbread man. So they have an outline around the shape. The entire cookie is outlined in the frosting, and then they do designs inside of it. So like you can do little squiggles, you can do some dots. And if you wanted to, you can color it in. I think I'm gonna leave mine blank, but you can if you wanted to color it in, or you can just do a thicker squiggle here, and then you can do different size. Maybe you have a smaller squiggle here. So you've got one cookie, and if you wanted to, you don't even have to, you could just do your dots and have the squiggles across it. Although I recommend if you're going to do that then you do the clipping mask, because you don't want it to go off your cookie. It's going to look really weird. But I'm going to do it kind of the traditional style where we have the frosting going along the shape, doing that outline. And I haven't made gingerbread cookies since I was like a kid. I'm not a big... Gingerbread cookies are okay. Sometimes I feel like they get really hard. But this year at the grocery store, they had a sale on those weird gingerbread cookie kits, and they had ninjas, and they had it comes with the cookie cutters and the dough and everything. And so got that from my husband as an early gift. So we're gonna make ninja Christmas cookies, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure when we're gonna make them, but maybe I'll post pictures on my email. If you're my email subscriber, you may get pictures of those, so we shall see. Okay, so now let's continue with our letter E. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. You kind of want it to look squiggly and imperfect, because unless you're like one of those professional bakers who does like the amazing looking cookies, my sister is one of those. She does an amazing job. She went to culinary school, and she does amazing cookies and cakes and everything, and she can decorate up a storm. But unless you're one of those and you're like me, I just make it more edible than the way it looks. I don't really care how it looks as long as it tastes good. But think about like if you have kids or grandkids or nieces, nephews, whatever, that, you know, maybe you're doing cookies with them, and so it never turns out perfect. I have a niece, and we made cookies with her once. Not cutouts, but, oh no, maybe we did do cutouts, but yeah, it didn't turn out perfect. But it was the fun of it. And again, this is your piece, so make it look unique to you. And again, you can make it look perfect if you want to, if you want that more professional baker shop. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe stealing some of your cookies if you do, because I bet they're amazing. And feel free to add different shapes too. You can do zigzags, you don't have to do dots, you can do hearts, you can do stars, you can do whatever you feel like. Okay, so now we've got our cookies, yay! Now we're gonna add extra lettering to this, because sweet, it's nice, but it's kind of boring. So we're gonna add to it. So I'm adding another layer on top, and I'm going to keep the same brush we've got, same color, and we're going to do some frosting. So same frosting, and we're gonna pretend it got squeezed onto this, and I'm just gonna do my, my monoline calligraphy, and we're gonna write, "Have a sweet Christmas." And I'm not using a grid, but you can turn yours on if you want to. And to do that, you would go to the wrench, and you can do the drawing guide, and you can get your grid on if you need a grid. And then I'm going to write Christmas at the bottom. And you can do different layers if you want to for these. Oops, let me redo that. And this would be so much harder to do in frosting. I've tried to actually do calligraphy in frosting before, and it does not turn out the way you would hope. All right, now because it's frosting, we want to give it kind of that feel too with the shadow. I'm going to just circle this and move this down a bit because I feel like it was too close. And yep, I think I like that. Well, actually, I'm going to move it over just a little bit more. Oops. Yeah, I turned my settings off where I can't do finger gestures anymore because I kept accidentally putting colors everywhere. So I'm kind of off centering it a little bit. All right, so we're gonna do what we did for our shadow here. So we're going to duplicate it, and then this bottom layer, we're gonna do the same thing where we're going to select it, get our color, we're gonna get that dark color, go back to our layer, and then we're going to, where's it? There we go, fill layer, and go to our magic wand, and we want the Gaussian blur, and I'm gonna zoom in so you can see it, okay? Because it might be hard to see. And we're gonna drag, and we only want it to be a little bit. We don't want a lot. So doing it about 7%, and zoom out again. I'm gonna turn this opacity down a little bit, not as much as I did the other one though. I'm gonna put it at about 86. And there you go. Now you've got your sweet Christmas card, or just your sweet lettering, whatever you want to consider it. Now feel free to add a bite taken out of one of these cookies. Get creative, you know, do that, or put different colored frostings. You can do cutout cookies instead of gingerbread cookies. You can do sprinkles. You can have crumbs on yours, but I'm just teaching you the basics and doing this. I'd love to see your work. So tag me at blackrose613 on Instagram and use the hashtag Wonder Wednesday projects. I would love to see your work, and I'd love to see it if you actually do this with real cookies, because that would definitely be very sweet. Have a great Christmas, guys, and I will see you next time.